decided to track your macros. You're tracking carbs, fats, and proteins. How many do I have in each meal? What's the difference between tracking your macros and other types of dieting? Today, we're going to be answering those questions. So the difference between something like working against gravity, which uses a flexible dieting approach, and something like the zone diet, which uses blocks, is mostly that they're just doing the same thing, but in a little bit of a different method. So when it comes to flexible dieting, we're tracking the exact amount of carbohydrates, fat and protein, fiber, and some other things in each meal, versus when you're doing something like the zone diet and blocks, you're having a certain ratio in each and every single meal, where that's not necessarily the case in flexible dieting. You can switch things up, and you're also not tracking all of the macronutrients in each and every single block. So you might have a block of meat, for instance, that has some fat in it, but you're only going to be tracking the protein in that particular block. So just a few subtle differences, but ultimately that's why when you're calculating the amount of calories that are in each blocks that you have, it seems like you're having less calories, but it's just because it's not accounting for the other macronutrients that are in that block, so it's compensating for that. When it comes to flexible dieting, you're tracking more of everything, and you don't necessarily have to have a specific ratio of carbohydrates, fat, and protein in each and every single meal. There are going to be some pros and cons to keeping your meals balanced in terms of the macro ratios throughout the day. So some pros is that you're never going to end up with a whole bunch of protein at the end of the day. So keeping your meals balanced and knowing that you're going to have a certain amount of carbs, fats, and protein in each meal means you're not going to be drinking a bunch of egg whites, having a bunch of chicken breast, because you just don't have any fat or carbohydrates left. Nobody enjoys that at the end of the day. Another benefit to having carbs, fats, and proteins even is to keep yourself evenly satiated throughout the day. You know you're not going to have a ton of food to eat at the end of the day, and you're not going to be starving at the beginning. It helps you plan things, it helps you make sure that you're going to be at where you want to be at the end of the day, not eating too much, not eating too little. One of the things that might not necessarily work, keeping your macronutrient ratios balanced in every single meal, is when you're working out. When you're working out, you might not want to have a lot of fat before and after your workouts, depending on how many fats and carbohydrates you're having, just because it can slow down the digestion of those carbohydrates, which can make it a little bit harder for you to get that energy during your workout. So it really just depends. It's something you want to take into consideration for sure, and it might help make things a little bit easier for you, but don't necessarily need to completely stress about it if it doesn't work for your schedule and you find yourself on the go and only having access to protein or only having access to a carbohydrate source. My best strategy for this question is going to be to plan ahead. So one of the things that completely changed my husband's life was when he realized that he could plan dinner ahead of time. He always worried that he was going to be hungry at the end of the day, so he would find that he would leave most of the volume of his food for the end of the day and just have so much to eat. Then he realized that he could just pre-plan what he was going to eat for dinner. Didn't want to plan the entire day, but if he planned what he was going to eat for dinner, then he knew that he could eat up the rest of his food throughout the day, and there was no way that he was going to be hungry before bed. Planning ahead of time is going to make it super easy for you to know that you're not going to have volume in the morning or midday or so much left at the end of the day. Hopefully the answers to these questions can help you better plan your day, make sure that you don't end up with a whole bunch of one macronutrient at the beginning or at the end of the day, and make it a lot easier for you to stay on top of your nutrition.